We are hosting this event with the African Minerals Development Center as SIA. And just a quick introduction, if you don't know SIA, SIA is an independent public policy think tank, and we lead discussion on issues important to Africa and trying to develop and co-create policy that can towards transformation of Africa's key democratic and security and democracy objectives. So with that at hand, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Dion Kluti. I work for the SIA Futures program, and we at the SIA Futures program trying to anticipate and imagine the key political, social, economic, environmental, and disruptors that might impact not only the Southern African region, but Africa in general. And we're looking also at technology disruptors and looking at the implications thereof for policymakers and key decision makers, and trying to anticipate those, develop and work with people to develop appropriate policy measures. With that said, I'm also standing in today for Alex Benkenstein, my colleague. He's unfortunately ill with COVID, and he needs the rest, and we wish him a speedy recovery. Alex Benkenstein is the head of the GAR program, the Governance of Africa's Resources program, and he was leading this conversation along with me. This whole meeting was actually started in Ghana, where we attended the African Mining Vision 10-year revision of what the African Mining Vision is about and where it's going, and hosted by the AU. And today we'd like to take the conversation a little bit further with the AMDC, and I'll first just like to introduce my panelists. First, we've got Frank Dixon Mugunyeni from the African Mineral Development Center. He's the director and acting coordinator of the AMDC. Thank you, Frank, for being here today. Then we've got Donna Dupont, who is the founder and chief strategist for and foresight and design specialist at Purple Compass. She's Donna Dupont is skilled for over 20 years experience working with leaders in healthcare, emergency management, government policy, public policy strategy and planning, as well as policy design. And she has facilitated a range of foresight and design activities in mining, healthcare, emergency management, and military. And we've got Dr. Ross Harvey, who is currently the Director of Research and Programs at the Good Governance Africa. And he is also a former colleague of mine. And Dr. Ross has got a PhD in economics at the University of Cape Town, and he used to lead at SIA the extractives industry governance and wildlife conservation work. So Ross, Donna, and Frank, welcome, and we're glad to have you. And let's now just start the discussion. Frank, I'd like to hand it over to you, and if you can switch on your video if possible. There you go. Please introduce yourself in terms of the AMDC, and just maybe put us into this discussion on the role and the importance of the African Mining Vision in Africa's mining futures. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the introduction, Michael, panelists, and welcome other panelists that have been introduced. I'm quite happy to be here. My name is Frank Mugunyeni, as it has been already introduced. I'm currently interim coordinator or director AI of the African Minerals Development Center, which was adopted in 2016 as a specialized agency of the African Union responsible for the coordination of the implementation of the Africa Mining Vision. The establishment of the MDC goes back, and I was quite privileged to be the lead person in the establishment of the MDC, transitioning it from a project that was being hosted by the United Nations to a specialized agency or a permanent institution of the African Union. And that came from the ministers who met in Maputo in 2013, recognizing the importance of an institution that can coordinate the implementation of the Africa Mining Vision and its sustainability. Because it was a project, they thought by having it as a permanent structure of the African Union, then it could have the sustainability, it could have a voice within the policy organs of the African Union as an independent or a semi-autonomous institution. So we have MDC, which was the statute of which was adopted by the heads of state and governments of the African Union in 2016. The implementation of the Africa Mining Vision itself, I wouldn't say much how important it is, but I can also say that as a vision of Africa that was adopted by the heads of state and government in 2009 to look at how mineral resources can contribute optimally to African vision of integration agenda, economic development, social and structural transformation. So the need to have a semi-autonomous specialized agency to look into how to coordinate this process was very important. For some of you colleagues, like Ross, we've met several times, and Alex, I'm sorry that he's not with us, and I'm praying that he'll be fine. We've met several times, so I'm not new to you. Probably I may be new to other people, but not specifically to Ross. We have met in Indaba, and we have looked at how the MDC, the MV has been implemented. We've had ministerial symposium, but there is a challenge of domestication of the Africa Mining Vision 11 years since it was adopted by the heads of state. So we are currently in reviewing the action plan. The first draft has come in. So having elements that can brief us and can help us in putting together what should be done to make sure that the vision comes from the vision into action going forward. Having launched the African Continental Free Trade Area, which started trading on the 1st of January this year. Economic integration is the agenda under the Agenda 2063, but also it's the agenda under the global vision of Sustainable Development Goals. So we are happy to be part of this, and I'm happy that within the Africa Mining Vision, under the Africa Mining Vision, and that the MDC would be key in ensuring that the futures literacy can be part of the Africa Mining Vision and helping member states to actually benefit more than they have benefited so far in terms of domesticating the Africa Mining Vision. So I'm hoping that the futures literacy could have a work stream, but also more importantly, we could develop an instrument, an AMV instrument that can then be adopted at the summit, at the ministerial level, and then can be used to support the implementation of the Africa Mining Vision. I think that is more than an introduction. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank, for that wonderful introduction and placing it into the context of the key issues at hand. I think taking the conversation further, we are in the post-normal time of COVID-19 and the global pandemic, and the African mining sector finds itself in definitely an uncharted territory, which is deeply uncertain. And as we can see, there might not be, and in many cases is no return to a business as usual. So we need to find new ways to address the devastating effects of not only effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, but several traumatic shocks and worldwide effects of the slowing economy. And this has huge implications for the extractive industry, And we've seen that the African mining industry has been resilient, but we also need to find new ways to find this crisis to change it into opportunity for novel responses that can be uniquely African in our innovations that we can develop in response to the crisis at hand. Now, the African mining vision, as Frank alluded to, represents, in my view, a collective reimagination towards transforming African mining futures. When you have a look at it from a futures perspective, or you apply a futures thinking lens, it is forward-looking. It's a forward-looking vision that seeks to empower policy and the regulatory framework, and to maximize the developmental outcomes. So, within that context, we need to definitely seek how we can not only start implement support the AMDC in its role, but also implement and find new ways to implement and empower the key decision makers and role players in implementing the AMD, and the ability to develop proactive responses that faces and challenges that the industry faces. So the challenge, however, is we cannot predict what will happen, and therefore we need the skills that we use in futures thinking to develop and envision and implement and revise our thinking continuously. So with that said, Donna, I'd like to now take us to the next kind of part of our discussion in asking you for your open statement and also addressing, in your view, what are the key issues at stake in the mining sector in general, a global view, but then also African view and the implications for the AMV and the AMDC. Thank you.
Thank you, Dion. So good morning, everyone. So in terms of mining, like at the global level, you know, mining is undergoing significant transformation, as we all know. So this shift towards sustainability is a big one, and it's global. It's kind of occurring across the world in terms of this idea of sustainable development. But what it means in terms of futures literacy and a vision is being able to articulate a collective vision of what that means. So looking at it from, well, what does that look like, not just from the policymakers' lens or into organizations that are collaborating and that have, industry knowledge. How can they work together? But also there's another layer of engaging the citizens and having a more of a participatory citizen engagement side, especially with, a lot of mines globally are in areas that are remote. They're environmentally could be very sensitive areas. Some of them are in, areas where there's indigenous populations. So there is a need for governance at various levels. When you're thinking about anticipatory governance, you need to look at it from where do we want to go and what is that vision of sustainability to look like, and where are the opportunities for innovation, but also what do we have to mitigate from a risk perspective. And then working with communities too. And this is where we get into the sustainable development goals and communities in terms of how can we be more socially inclusive? How can we be environmentally sustainable and economic development? And so being able to tap into those broad themes within the sustainable development goals is powerful. There was a white paper that was published in 2016. It's the Mining Atlas for SDGs, and it identified that the mining sector can positively make a contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, and that there's different ways to do it. And it's all about how we manage things. So being very proactive in the management to create jobs, ensure local procurement, spur innovation, invest in infrastructure. All of these things are within that realm. But if they're not managed well, then what we're dealing with is environmental degradation. We're dealing with possible displacement. We're dealing with inequalities and possibly increased conflict due to environmental security issues with food, water, things like that. So in this context, being anticipatory, being, looking to the future, looking how, kind of what the current risk profile is, where we think things are emerging, where possible disruption it could occur, and being very proactive from a risk perspective, but also looking at the opportunities for innovation and new thinking, and to do it broadly, not necessarily in one pocket, not just policymakers, but open it up broadly to institutions who have the expertise, but also citizens that are directly involved and impacted by some of the the consequences and the disruptions. So that would be my opening statement.
Thank you, Donna. Ross and Frank, please feel free to take the conversation further, but let me first ask Ross to also just contribute to what Donna was saying, and let's address some of the issues and challenges at hand, and then we'll take the conversation further to start unpacking the details. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Dion, and yeah, sorry to hear about Alex. Frank, very nice to see you again, if not in person, but we trust that will happen in the near future. As Dion indicated, I head up the research division at Good Governance Africa, and one of our research units is the Natural Resource Governance Program, in which we aim to connect mining opportunities to green industrialization. But of course, our bread and butter is good governance. And I liked Donna's reference to anticipatory governance. So Dion, if I may, I'm gonna, in a sense, somewhat antithetical to futures, just start by looking back before I look forward. And these are I've entitled my opening remarks, Can the Africa Mining Vision Still Accomplish Its Objectives? So when the AMV was launched in 2009, few could argue, and few can still argue with its forward-thinking substance. It envisions a continent that harnesses its mineral and hydrocarbon wealth for broad-based development, and with governance, transparency, and accountability as its heartbeat. The vision delineates mining as a kind of flywheel for structural transformation. And this is the DNA of the AMV, and it is undoubtedly good. For all its promise, however, as Frank indicated, the AMC hasn't delivered. And this is easily explainable. A vision is really only as strong as its implementation. And so for this reason, the Africa Minerals Development Center, with Frank at the helm, the custodian of the vision, quite rightly embarked on a mission to domesticate the AMV for each country. This strategy recognizes that each country is unique. Each has a peculiar set of institutions inherited from the colonial era, most of which were designed to extract rather and repatriate raw materials to imperial powers. Post-independence, those institutions have largely been subverted into tools of narrow enrichment for wealthy elites and entrenched them in power. This is the essence, if you like, of the resource curse, this paradoxical relationship or correlation between mineral abundance and underdevelopment, and it must be reversed. Like with all correlations, however, they should not be confused with causation. And so the AMV correctly harnessed can actually cut through this vicious cycle of rent accumulation to the elites at the expense of citizens. In other words, mineral wealth can and should lead to development that benefits a vast majority of citizens. Now, as the world deals with the aftermath, and in some cases like ours, the middle of COVID-19, we have no better opportunity than the present to try and realize the AMV. For the last few decades, we've known that climate change is a serious threat to the future of our shared planet. We have failed, however, to change direction quickly enough, largely because profits, in my view, inaccurately measured, were high, and the costs of generating pollution were seen as low by those with decision-making power. We've therefore continued to mine and burn coal. We've continued to exploit oil resources, both at substantial environmental cost. The key to a desired future, or set of desired futures, if you like, is to eliminate what economists call negative externalities. Now, negative externalities are just simply the divergence between private returns and social costs. And the 2015 Paris Agreement, for all its challenges, commits countries to reducing emissions and therefore global warming to below 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. A necessary but insufficient mechanism for reducing negative externalities. Because it is essentially non-binding, it can't generate in itself the incentives required to forcefully nudge firms to internalize the costs of pollution and the impact that has on host communities. Until now, there has unfortunately been little in the way of credible deterrence to disincentivize firms from offloading these social and environmental costs onto local communities who can least afford them. It is partly for this reason, actually, that COVID-19 erupted at all. We ignored the costs of environmental encroachment, and climate change unleashes viral dark matter, and we have likely only seen the tip of the iceberg. Not a very encouraging message. However, there is always hope. And one of the relevant forms that hope takes in our current moment is actually the ESG movement. So environmental, social, and governance performance is rapidly becoming a determining variable in capital allocation decisions. Eventually, the world has realized that true sustainability, profits that will endure through time, lies in committing to the spirit of good governance, eliminating environmental degradation, and doing right by citizens. Of course, merely ticking boxes on these three metrics will take us no closer to where we need to be, but at least greenwashing is becoming a serious operational risk. But because access to capital will increasingly be contingent on authentic ESG credentials, firms are being disciplined to this end. There's nothing quite as powerful as a market tool to help us reduce negative externalities. So what does all this mean for the future of mining in Africa? Now, first, because the drive towards carbon neutrality by 2050 will require minerals and metals that Africa has in plentiful supply, copper, cobalt, lithium, and the like, the demand side of the positive futures equation looks promising. The key to translating this demand into sustained development, however, still lies in the bread and butter of anticipatory governance, as Donna rightly mentioned. The ESG moment presents an opportunity to attract responsible mining firms that will help to build state institutions and become real development partners rather than mere policy takers or resource extractors. However, ruling elites, ruling coalitions across the continent will have to make a conscious decision to attract responsible capital. It may appear less costly to run after irresponsible finance from jurisdictions that pay no heed to our development imperatives, but the least costly options in the short run invariably have the most devastating long-term consequences. We want to avoid those. Second, with the guidance of the AMV's emphasis on structural transformation, it is essential that policymakers connect mining opportunities to green industrialization, for lack of a better phrase. So a critical strategic goal of African countries is to reverse premature deindustrialization. Okay, and this is the process by which we see developing countries transitioning out of manufacturing and into low-value services, unfortunately at much lower levels of per capita income and earlier than our industrialized counterparts. So reversing this premature transition or this premature deindustrialization will necessarily mean connecting mining to global value chains involved in producing new low carbon forms of energy and transport, among other things. So that's got to be our policy imperative with anticipatory governance. So lastly, realizing these strategic objectives will require a commitment to good governance, anticipatory governance, and sensible policy making by states. Part of what we try to do as GGA is to help effect this. We're trying to connect responsible players to governments and to capital firms that are looking for responsible clients. Mining and industrialization policies simply must reflect the DNA of the Africa mining vision and be orientated towards attracting players that are ESG committed. And similarly, mining firms must endure the upfront learning costs of embodying ESG principles as part of the ethos. The long-term payoff is that social performance will become mainstreamed and produce genuine sustainability. With more effective states and more responsible mining and manufacturing firms, broad-based development may actually become a realizable future, and that is certainly what we are after. So that's it by way of opening from me, Dion, and thanks again for hosting an important conversation.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ross, for your contribution. Dorothy Wangi, can you just mute yourself, please? Thank you. Frank, thank you also that you invited Learn More Nyamuzanga to the conversation. I would like to now just also ask Learn More as a short notice person to contribute to discussion due to also one of our key respondents or panelists that had to withdraw from the ANC, AMDC's discussion panel. Frank has asked Learn More to contribute to the discussion. So Learn More is, I'd just like to quickly introduce him. He's a blogger, volunteer, and economist, as well as an intern at the Minerals Africa Development Institution. He is a member of the Zimbabwe Economic Society, as well as the volunteer to the African Youth Initiative on Climate Change and the International Human Rights Commission. So Learn More, thank you so much for also joining the conversation. Would you like to respond to the previous panelists and the topics they addressed? And please feel free to add to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. As you have already said, my name is Learn More Nyamuzanga. I'm from Zimbabwe. Today, I'm happy to represent some of the interns at MADI, if you already said. Let me begin to say we are happy because MADI is to create an open and constructive environment to support the economic and social environmental structural transformation of Africa in mineral sector. So we as interns, we thought it was necessary also to come up with our view concerning the future literacy in regards to the Africa mining vision. So we sort of like came up with our views, like to analyze the future literacy, which I will share with you what we think in regards to that. So number one, I would say the idea of future literacy is key to understand and empower the implement of the Africa mining vision. And from our view, it is welcome. And we also support that it should be maybe added to be part of the AMDC, so that we don't have to start something which is new, but to use the existing resources, to strengthen the Africa mining view, also using this issue of what future literacy. We also view that, for the principles of the African mining vision to be fully realized, the government and the civil society, the think tanks such as the MADI and so many other organizations should work closely together in areas of mineral-related training, governance, and programming. This will enable synergy for the realization of sustainable and economic for Africa mineral sector. However, we are of the view that it needs at least to be simplified, because as it is right now, the issue of Africa Mind Vision is not known by everyone. We are talking of someone on the ground, a layman. So we are saying, if we are to include the issue of future literacy, we have to try by all means to simplify so that it is understood by everyone. Remember, this is affects each and everyone. It's not only for the specialists or technical people, but also the people on the ground for this thing to be successful. We are also of the view that the MENA, for example, at MAD, they do a lot of like events where they approach like different people from the government ministries, experts. We also need to adopt the same approach to make sure that this issue of literacy is sold, is preached to other people to understand it. We are also of the view that the future literacy, it must come in a way to quicken the process of domesticating the African mining vision rather than to delay. So it is one of the view that we wish the issue of future literacy to sort of like quicken the process, because as it stands, there are very few countries which are on the ground domesticating the AMV. So we also hope that the future literacy will help us to quicken the process. Yes, we understand COVID has taught us a number of lessons. So this issue of future literacy is very important in the sense that there are certain things that we cannot foresee. So if we adopt this issue, this future literacy, it will assist us. So I would say it came at the right time. It also COVID, I understand the cost that we are incurring due to COVID, but also it has also brought some new ways of doing things. I think some colleagues have already said it. I'm also to add to that, I'm also that the AMDC has been tasked with the establishment of African Mining Futures Literacy, and it will be good in a good avenue for advocating knowledge and sharing platform with other organizations, because as it stands, it is sort of a think tank of the Africa Mining Vision. So if they are the ones who then begin to preach the idea, then we hope that it can easily spread to the maybe finance ministers or the other people who are involved, or those ministers who represent different countries. And also, I think Donna already spoke about issue of sustainable development. Sustainable. We also believe that we need also sustainable mineral development policy for Africa, and we also believe that with this future literacy, if we merge the two, I think we can come up with something which is good. I think I've got a whole lot of points here, but for now, I think I will end here so that we can exchange and continue to discuss. So for now, I'll submit. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Then more, thank you very much for your views. We appreciate them. We welcome them. Thank you so much. Frank, would you like to just also respond and add to the discussion at this stage? Thank you very much.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Lanmo, for that submission, and my area colleagues, Rose and Donna. We are all at the point where Africa is at crossroads. And some people say COVID-19 is a wake-up call. Some of us think, okay, how would we get out of this, especially in regard to mineral resource development? The Africa Mining Vision is a vision, and the visions are not easily implementable because these are long-term vision. We are still struggling with the Lagos Plan of Action. It was a vision. The Agenda 2063 and the Abuja Treaty are all visions. So there is a requirement for instruments to help implement the vision. And what Lanmo has just said is very critical, because in sometime mid-20, I think 2015, 2016, 2017, while trying to look at countries to domesticate the Africa Mining Vision, we went to Malawi, and we had a discussion with the parliamentarian, which are the legislative body of governments. And the committee responsible for natural resource development, which is responsible for mineral resource development, didn't have even a clue on what the Africa Mining Vision is all about. And so this is not only for Malawi, it cuts across Africa. If you go to Midrand and talk to the Pan-African Parliament, they don't even know what Africa Mining Vision is all about. When we were in 2013, the minister said we need to have to broaden partnerships within the Africa Mining Vision. So we brought in the private sector, and we have established the African Chamber of Mines and other mining associations as a representative of the private sector. But we also needed a civil society platform. We put together some of the platform, but it has not been functioning recently, which we need to pull up as MDC gets operational. So yes, there is a need to take the MDC down to the level of the understanding of the common person in the communities, but also government members and all other stakeholders who have the microphone for the private sector. So we have 3 instruments that we have developed so far. We, as Africa Mining Vision, which were adopted by the ministers. The first one was the Geological and Mineral Information Systems Strategy, where we believe that Africans must know what they have, which will have to help them, manage their resources sustainably. And in that, under that, we are currently developing an African Mineral Resource and Energy Classification Framework, AMREC, which is within the framework of the United Nations Framework for Mineral Resource Classifications. And we are partnering with UNECE, United Nations Commission for Europe, in developing this. But when I talk about geological and mineral information systems and the AMREC of classifications and the Pan-African Reporting Code, so that we have a code, a Pan-African code where projects can be reported. I mean, Ross was talking about attracting responsible capital, responsible investment, and we are looking at even mobilizing domestic resources. But all this information at GMIS requires the future literacy and knowledge and for people to understand what are the minerals for the future, what are the minerals for now, how do we go about them, what will be the stranded animals, or resources, stranding resources. Ross referred to green industrialization. Africa is struggling, and most of the countries are looking to oil and gas, which is a new invention from Uganda and other countries. But 20 years down the road, it will be one of the stranded resources. And how do we, understand how to go about it? Some of the mineral resources that Africa needs to go to may be seen as low value minerals, but they have come up to be known as development minerals that can support, structural transformation, and there will be need for diversification from the traditional knowledge of mining, which we are looking at diamond, gold, platinum group metals, and then look at what mineral resources can be value added on in Africa. So this is the knowledge that we need to have, and probably futures literacy may play a part in there. We also have the Africa Governance Framework, AMGIF. The Africa Governance Framework was developed along the value chain to look at how the MV monitoring as a monitoring tool for the domestication of the Africa Mining Vision, to look at how countries are responding to how mineral resources can contribute to their national long-term plans, the regional long-term plans, and then continental long-term plan, the Agenda 2063, the attainment of the continental free trade area. So that's why the idea from Ross of having to look at global value chains, how do we integrate African mineral resource development into the global value chain? Because when you look at the entire value chain, mining is an enclave of extracting resources from the soil and exporting them as raw. That's why the sector is always have to be called mining. But from the African Minerals Governance Framework, we decided to look beyond mining, beyond along the value chain until the closure of mineral resources, but also on value addition, beneficiation, job creation, services, and so forth. and look beyond. And this whole process of domesticating AMV through its own instruments, AMV instruments, requires this kind of literacy to be able, and as Lanmo said, they have to come down to the level, because the person at the lower level may not understand ESG that is being referred to by Ross, which informs the future responsible capital attraction, because but the low person down who is going to be affected by issues of social and governance and environmental governance don't actually know what it is all about, even though they may be doing it, but they don't know. We recently had a small research on artisanal small-scale mining and did a survey to understand whether some of these people do things unknowingly, which actually contribute to environmental protection. And some of them do, but they don't know they are doing it. So there is a lack of that knowledge. So I think Lanmo is quite clear to say that we need to dismantle, to open it up, to bring it down to the understanding. Then the third one, the third instrument that was also adopted by the member states, but also was discussed and developed with the private sector, is the AMV Private Sector Compact. The AMV Private Sector Compact, we started developing it. We worked with the MIASA, Mining Industries of Southern Africa, with the Veston Malangu, who was the CEO by that time, from Malawi, from Namibia. And then we took it to East Africa. It was adopted. West Africa adopted it. Central Africa adopted it, until the African Continental Body, the African Chamber of Mines and other mining associations, and African Women in Mining Associations, AWIMA, together endorsed it. And this has got principles upon which the sector and the government have to collaborate and work together to ensure that there is sustainable mineral resource development in Africa. We reduce what is called illicit financial flow, but we also reduce corruption from our governments, and see that there is the proper governance that Ross was referring to, which is a missing link at the moment. So we have those principles that have been agreed upon from the private sector. Say, if you do this, I do this. If you do this, I do this. And that should be a mutual benefit, mutual inclusion to ensure that then we look forward to mutual benefits accruing to everybody. And I think my colleagues have already alluded to that the future literacy still plays a big part in this. Right now, we are developing two more new instruments that are very pertinent to AMV domestication. One is the model law for mineral resource development. And I know there was another model law that was developed by some other agencies that we need to look at, but we have already done a draft 0 report that was supposed to have been discussed by now. So MDC will be looking at how do we finalize this, and all these instruments are yet to be actually pushed out there for consultative processes beyond the regional economic communities, beyond the ministerial meetings, beyond the groups of experts that we develop them with. But take them down and dismantle them and take them down to the people that are involved in the mining sector, and mainly the artisanal small-scale miners, who are a big group of people on the continent. Then the other one we're actually developing, which is also in relation to the ASM, is an ASM strategy at the continental level, which we don't have. We had the Mosatunya Declaration, thanks to the Development Minerals and Daniel Franks, who under the UNDP Development Minerals that we had in Livingstone in Zambia. I think it was 2017 or 2018. Beyond that, we don't have a clear strategy that the African can use to look at the development of harnessing the potential of the artisanal small-scale miners. So with this, I think from the colleagues that have been talking in terms of how do we get there, do we take the future of the MV into implementation, we'll need that whole future literacy to work with us. And that's why I alluded to the fact earlier that we can either have it as a standalone pillar for the Africa Mining Vision way forward, this is what I'm looking at, or we can actually look at whether it can be integrated into any of the, as a pillar, as a stream in one of the strategies that have already been adopted. But I think my colleagues have really put forward arguable discussions that indeed the future's literacy will be very relevant for the future of the domestication of the Africa mining vision. We actually right now working with the UN, African Development Bank, in looking at the green minerals strategy. So when you look at the green mineral strategy, we're already looking at what the future has in terms of climate change and so forth, and green technologies and green industrialization. But also we have issues like AI, artificial intelligence, the fourth industrial revolution. All these are issues that will impact the domestication of the Africa mining vision. How do we go forward with automation in the industry when actually, we need to lose, we will lose jobs that we are looking for. Our young people going to look for jobs in Europe, but then the industries in the mining sector are actually automating and using robots and so forth. So how do we, handle all these things? I think we need to look at this. I think it was a need by yesterday, but it's good to come at this point, especially when we have the impact of COVID, that we can re-strategize and look how we move forward to ensure that the AMV indeed plays its own transformative role of the mineral resources to support member states achieve structure and social and structural transformation. So I think, Mr. Moderator, that would be my comments for now, and then we can have others add on to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Frank. We appreciate all those interesting perspectives, comments, and insights in what's the inner workings of the AMDC and the amazing work you are doing, the important work that's happening behind the scenes to get these difficult policy regimes and processes and structures in place for really creating transformative approaches to the implementation of the AMB. Thank you so much. I'd like to now open the floor also to anyone that would like to ask a question or comment, while at the same time, please raise your hand or just write a comment in the chat box if you would like. Comments, questions are welcome to anybody. This is an open platform workshop kind of setting, and we'd like to discuss issues pertinent to the future. But to just have a little bit of a theme on this, let's just have Donna, would you like to just come in here again and take the conversation a little bit further? I'm sure I saw you taking down notes. I think what's important for me now to add to the discussion, and you can place it into that framework, is to really look at what we can call the high impact key uncertainties of the African mining futures and implementing the AMB. And these high impact key uncertainties play a huge role in affecting the futures of mining. So thank you, Donna.
So yes, I did take quite a few notes just from both Frank and Lenmore's comments, because I found them really powerful in terms of understanding a couple of common themes that keep coming up, right? And so with Frank was speaking a lot about moving beyond the value chain. A lot of, mining is a very complex industry, and it's very engineering focused, and there's a lot of technology and technical aspects that need to be considered. And so it's very complex. And what really struck me was when Frank had mentioned that the vision is not necessarily understood by all. So I guess the question is, when you think about futures literacy, whose vision is it? Is this, how inclusive has the process been to capture people's vision within, or people's tapping into different pockets, experiences, collective intelligence to create this vision. So that's one aspect when you're thinking about implementing any vision. And then strategically, it sounds like there's a lot of happening on the tools side in terms of, understanding the tools, understanding and gathering knowledge and information on the African mining front. But there's also a lot of opportunity, as Ross was saying too, around the social performance and ESG and anticipatory literacy kind of moving into that space of the community level. And so when I think about anticipatory governance, think about governance not just at the high level of organizational governance, but also governance coming down at the commons level of communities who are directly impacted. And there are, frameworks, anticipatory commons governance frameworks that really engage people at the local level in their experience. And that probably could fit into some of the ESG type measures or work. It definitely fits into some of the principles of, of sustainable mining at the global level. I see International Community for Minerals and Mining, that talk about social performance and the importance of that, stakeholder engagement, and being very open and very, very transparent. So I see when you talk about futures literacy, you need to look at a vision and you need to be engaged at different levels, right? And then moving forward with different specialities. It's interesting. Frank also mentioned around technology and innovation and artificial intelligence and that type of shift happening across different sectors, but mining included, and what's the impact to jobs. Having an anticipatory lens and understanding how the landscape may shape or shift, for mining, it gives an opportunity to redefine new jobs, that could evolve, new training, new supports, things like that could be made available, as opposed to just looking at, dismissing jobs, but also where can we create new, because there's new skills that are required, right, to be able to move forward with this new vision and this new type of operations for the industry. So those were some of the things that came up as I was listening to the conversation. And the second part of your question, Dion, was around futures literacy. Can you remind me a bit?
Yeah, I think what's important for us now is let's make it also open the floor for other participants. But in your view, what would be the highest impact key uncertainties that we're looking at for the mining sector in a 5, 10, 15-year kind of view? And if we would rank the top 3 or 5 issues, I mean, I'd like to open this also to other people, to everyone on this workshop or this call, to just add to what they view as the uncertainties, that the issues at hand that really might be impacting on. We've heard a lot, the AI, we've heard the impact. So Donna, in your view, and then please, again, I invite people to put up their hands, and then you are free to contribute to this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, the critical uncertainties are important, because that's really what futures literacy is about, is really, being able to move into the uncertainty and to navigate the uncertainty, as opposed to just working with information we know. I think the climate, there's many critical uncertainties. So when you think about a critical uncertainty, you're thinking about something that you can't predict or control, right? But has a huge impact on the operations of the organization, or has an impact on the communities, right? So there's a lot of them. And I think it depends on the perspective, right, of where you are in the system and how you see, where you see the critical uncertainty. But from my perspective, and where I'm seeing it from the work that I'm doing, is really on the environmental side, a lot, and the community side, the social community side. So, because those are areas that the climate, we know that the climate is shifting, but it's the impact, right? Understanding what that means to the institution, to the sector, and how the sector can be not only anticipatory but agile and adaptive, knowing that information and being able to move and progress and make change. So I think the climate one is a significant one, and are seeing a few different mining companies exploring how to implement the task force for climate disclosures, and just looking at greenhouse gas emissions and net zero 2050 and how to do it, right? So that's like a whole new pathway. So I see there's a lot of uncertainty there, tremendous, but opportunity. tremendous opportunity. And then I think the other one I think is a big one is at the community level. I think that historically there hasn't been a lot of engagement with communities in a healthy way. And I'm talking about it globally because I've been, privy to a lot of different conversations around the world around this. And so this is a brand new way of working with communities, especially on the social governance, environmental social governance side, and really looking at that. And so again, it links back to social performance, right? And how's the sector shifting and how are they engaging in that way? Because communities face the ultimate impact of any kind of, if there's degradation to the environment, if there's any significant, climate disruption, they're the first ones that will, be facing the impact. So I think that is a big uncertainty area. Is that what does that new governance structure look like? Is it a common governance framework? Is it integrate into a broader framework? Where's the accountability? Love to see some of that moving into the future. Thank you for the opportunity to share. I'm very open to hear others' perspective and ideas around this, because I think there are many, many opportunities and many uncertainties to be explored.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Donna. Before we move on to Ross and the other panelists that we've heard before and has been contributing, please, I've seen some people interested to contribute to the discussion. If you would like to, now's your time, just unmute yourself and speak and just ask or contribute or share some of your views on what are the key, some of your views. Thank you very much. I'll give it a minute or 30 seconds for a person to speak up. Please, this is an open and free space to join the discussion. Thank you.
Dion, I just wanted to, before Ross comes in, I think probably coming, I wanted to emphasize on what Donna has just said in terms of, and it's linked with what Ross has said earlier on in his submission about commitment to governance. I think if we can, that is very important in terms of what we are going to be doing. Commitment to governance, and it flows in with ESG, but also in attracting responsible investment. If there is no commitment to governance, that I think would be a lost opportunity. And then I think Ross also brought in issues of externalities as an important issue for future literacy. I think those two, if Ross and others can comment on or give more view on them, I think it will be very important as some of the pillars you have been asking about. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Nicholas King has got his hand up. Nicholas, please go ahead. Thank you also for your comments in the chat box.
Great, thanks, Dion. Thanks for the opportunity. Been a great discussion so far. I'd just like to pose a very specific question then to the panelists for a response, which is really a lot of the new technologies and so on are being touted as enabling Africa to exploit its fossil fuel resources. The International Energy Agency's annual report just out in May basically said there's no room for any more fossil fuels if we want to have any chance of meeting the Paris Agreement targets. And yet we see things like the East African crude oil pipeline, we see things like the Okavango exploration by Recon Africa, we see coal mining proposals going ahead all over the continent. And so in one sense, there's this complete lack of recognition that fossil fuels have to be shut down and no new exploitation can be utilized, and mining is the first step in that exploitation. And the second is that Africa, being straddling the equator, the only continent that does fully straddle it, is one both going to be impacted the most by climate change, but also has the greatest opportunity to develop renewables in the form of solar. And we should really leapfrog now, not invest into what are going to be 50, 60 year long fossil fuel resources and coal-fired power stations and so on, but simply leap ahead with the technology to take on renewable resources. So I'd just like to put that quite specifically to the panel, if that's okay, and look forward to hearing the answers. Thanks.
Thanks, Nicholas. Please go ahead. Any of the panelists would like to answer. Ross, you've indicated it looks like you want to respond, or Frank, go.
Yeah, thanks, Dion. Frank, sorry if you don't mind. And Nick, thanks so much for the question. And I think it is critical. There does seem to be a disjunct between the resources that are available and the equations that extractive companies then use to make decisions about where they're going to extract and what they're going to extract. I think that the International Energy Association's report is dead clear, and fossil fuel resources, hydrocarbons, are going to have to stay in the ground. Unfortunately, that does mean that the rents which would otherwise have been extracted now cannot be extracted, and that becomes a political economy issue, and it becomes a question of, you know, global balance of power, and, you know, how dare the wealthy world dictate to us that we must leave these things in the ground. And yet I think we've got to be bold in truncating that discussion, just attenuating it by saying we've got one shared planet. You know, I know you share this view, Nick, that we actually have to look after it together. And instead of seeing this as some kind of developmental trade-off, we actually need to say, look, we do have an opportunity to leapfrog. We've got an opportunity to abandon fossil fuels, even if oil goes to $100 a barrel. It's very short-termist, and it's extremely destructive for the environment, which is in turn destructive for local communities. So I think that these key uncertainties that Donna mentioned and that Frank elaborated on are all interconnected. Now, and there are risks and opportunities in each of them. Artificial intelligence, it may equip us with the technologies that can extract fossil fuels more efficiently. We've got to abandon that. We have to say, look, that's not our vision. Right? We've got energy from the sun. We've got energy from water. We've got energy from the wind. We can really harness these in a way that allows us to abandon massive centralized infrastructure, energy transmission grids, Medupi and Kusile coal-fired power stations that don't work because of the corruption associated with mega deals. These are things we here among us need to be saying, look, we don't want this anymore. We want power, quite literally, to be devolved and put in the hands of local communities, and energy and electricity similarly devolved. And we are going to require some minerals and metals. We know this, unfortunately, to feed this transition to a cleaner future. Of course, work is being done on developing synthetic alternatives, and that is another key uncertainty. We know that copper is currently irreplaceable, but there is massive investment into alternative electricity conductors, alloy graphites and things that I don't fully understand, but I'm developing a keen interest in, because it'll change the shape of the equation that determines whether mining goes ahead. You know, as Donna said right up front, mining is complex. It's often a long lead time game, and shareholder returns, unfortunately, are often the thing that determines whether an investment goes ahead. And when the oil price shoots up, that works against the kind of futures that we want to see. But I think increasingly we need to have adapted accounting systems that show that what looks like a profit actually is not sensible, because of the environmental and social costs that are currently not properly accounted for, but I hope will increasingly be properly accounted for through the emphasis on ESG investing, authentic ESG investing, and not greenwashing. I think the other challenge here, and in relation to your question, Nick, is that with renewables, the electric car and so on are still quite a long way off from being any kind of silver bullet, and they have their own kind of issues. You've got to drive the car for, hundreds of thousands of kilometers before it actually hits net zero. But at least there's a kind of switch, there's a good paper that I'll be happy to share on the group about transitioning to clean technologies. And you need this kind of combination of carbon taxes and subsidization towards cleaner technologies that that'll take us in the right direction. So I think we need to think about that in our policy construction. How do we incentivize the development of cleaner technologies? Lastly, one of the major difficulties around the fourth industrial revolution, if you like, is this question of job opportunities. And mining was in the past typically seen as quite labor absorptive. It increasingly is less so. I think we need to see that as a positive. Obviously, job losses are highly socially disruptive and they are very costly politically and so on. But this has to be a key part of our anticipatory governance. Mining is not going to be a major employer. It is increasingly lending itself to automation and to not have. The reason I say we should see that as a positive is that you don't have to put rock drill operators down a 3-kilometer long mine shaft for 12 hours a day in terrible conditions. That's a good thing, but the anticipated loss of income to that community, especially given the high number of dependents on any given mining sector job, and this is especially true in artisanal mining that Frank spoke about, which is just not addressed sufficiently. We have to be creating opportunities in side stream and upstream industries and downstream, but that downstream doesn't have to be immediately connected to mining. It has to be connected to the net zero 2050 opportunities. So I think that's where the strategy has to go. It has to say, all right, we have opportunities to tap into the global value chains that will evolve towards net zero 2050, and therefore we must develop technologies that can help us in Africa to better harness the sun and the wind and the water that we do have. Reduce our agricultural footprint, reduce our mining footprint to only what's necessary to get us to that set of futures. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of political skill to get there. And there are always opportunists who are looking for the big car power ship deals or the East Africa oil pipeline deals and so on. And we've got to be on our guard. So I think we can't emphasize this point of anticipatory governance enough. It really is critical. But I hope we've done something to take the conversation along, Nick. That it's a great question, and the IEA report is critical for all of us to digest, I think.
Thank you, Ross. I appreciate your insights and comments there. I think what I would like to add to the discussion as well is that while things are changing and the landscape is changing, it does not mean that we can definitely predict the future. As any futurist like Donna would say, the future cannot be predicted, as it's not available, and it's only available to us through imagination and anticipation. And therefore, we need to develop our skills, our capacity to anticipate. And it's a skill that we can learn to better prepare ourselves for multiple kind of futures that might happen. So in terms of that, I received a comment from both Learn More as well as Noema Grobro, which is our head of research, director of research. And she also mentioned that, yes, definitely, we also need to look at the legacy issues of mining. You know, a lot of this is changing any system and transitioning from one system to another. Means that you have to take the path dependency into mind. So there is the issue of pollution and how mines need to be thought of new. Now, Donna and other panelists have commented on sustainable mining. We see key players developing notions of smart mining. There's a World Bank report recently out on smart climate mining practices and approaches, as well as a few others. And that is important for this discussion to also take into in account. But also, I think while we see the narrowing of new technologies, creation for job opportunities, it also opens new industries, new value chains, and the new value chains, like we said. So in terms of this discussion, I think also closely related to climate change and the impacts of the green industries and economies, green skills will be required for mining of green minerals, and that's closely connected to the digital economy. So there is this opportunity for Africa to now not only develop new skills that's appropriate for the innovations that are allowed, but at the same time to enable a just transition, working closely with communities, upskilling, reskilling. In our current project on green hydrogen as a new power fuel for the future of South Africa, we also see green hydrogen as a wonderful resource of energy production that for all across Africa that will be enabling the mining communities, because it's a heavy industry power fuel, to use sources of energy that are moving us towards low carbon outputs and reducing emission reduction. So with that in mind, my question to any of the people participating in this workshop is, how can we deal with communities and jobs and the reskilling to ensure a just transition, taking all those factors into account? Thank you.
If I may come in, as some other people are thinking to come in and answer your question. I think Mr. King raised a key question, and I think I alluded to that earlier on in my submission, that African countries are still looking at those resources that will probably become stranded tomorrow or have started becoming stranded, and how do we take opportunities, but also the challenges. It's not only like that we are losing them, but there are other opportunities coming with them. And one of those opportunities is to value add, because if oil and gas is losing market at the global level because of the climate change as a fossil fuel, but when you value add it, you create more jobs through the byproducts, not necessarily the oil and petroleum products, but other products which feed into infrastructure, plastic products and other, maybe the process for transforming them, as Ross has been saying, it could need greener technology industries, but there are a lot of other byproducts from fossil fuels that don't have to go into cars for emissions, but which create more jobs and also feed into the needs of the African development, especially infrastructure, roads, and building construction and so forth. So, but this hasn't come through to Africa. And most of the challenge we have, and which I think this program, if we are going to take it forward, MDC with our partners, is that the domestication of the Africa mining vision has been all along a demand-driven, looked from the demand-driven demands perspective, that countries have to request for us, for AU or MDC, to go in and help them develop a country mining vision and then eventually domesticate. We need to move forward and repackage the MV from the supply side. And if we're going to go to the supply side, even if we wanted to have the demand from member states to request for support on advising them what the minerals how the minerals can contribute to their first and foremost national development plans, and later on regional, and later on Africa. We need to look at supply side and package it with the instruments that will help member states understand what the Africa mining vision is and what is supposed to give them. And I think futures literacy is one of them, bringing all these issues we are bringing out during this forum. So we have that challenge. We are building a pipeline. Uganda in East Africa, it has questions and it has impact, but again, the country is looking at it. The moment immediately after the late Magufuli passed on, the current president came to Uganda and they signed that tripartite agreement to have the process move forward. but the countries are looking at it from the supply side, oil and for export. They have not looked at it to put refineries and value add and create, so that in the next 10 years, where we are going through the greener technology, electronic cars and so forth, but we have created industries that will create more jobs for the people who are losing jobs from the other sectors. That's point number one. Point number two is that I want to look at the diversification in the mineral resource sector. The current impact of the mining that Africa Mining Vision was looking at is on the high value minerals that are all affecting Africa in terms of the ESG and others. Gold, platinum group metals. Now we have other minerals that are coming up, 3Ts and others that are required. But we have this whole lot of body of not going to be affected by any of the issues related to greener technologies, but instead they will contribute to greener technologies. We have the low value minerals or the development minerals, which feed into building construction. It feeds into fertilizers. It feeds into we have stone mining, salt mining. We have quarry mining. We have dimension stones. We have sand. We have cement. We have all these other things. We need to. Africa needs to look at the entire spectrum of and then the planning would be which would add to a long sustainable development. How much is produced in terms of jobs, skilled jobs, through high value mining, and what are the jobs that I'm getting through development minerals? And for Uganda alone, under the UNDP development program, they found almost 300,000 direct beneficiaries from the so-called low value minerals or development minerals, where the high value minerals, gold and others, don't even have, there are no industries in one country. So the job that Madi will have with his partners is to now take Africa Mining Vision down to the level of people to understand, to have this discussion. And then in terms of pushing for the commitment of governance through the civil society, through the communities, it will be to ensure that the government knows the benefits, because the people are demanding for those benefits under the legislation or under the politics arm and whatever it is. But if the people on the ground in Africa know our integration into regional value chains and eventually global value chains would be more easier. So we need to repackage, and I think Futures Literacy help us from MDC point of view and from the African Union point of view to take down the Africa Mining Vision to communities, as Donna was saying earlier on, so that we get a bottom-up approach from having the top-bottom approach that has been played all along. Submission.
Thank you so much, Frank. That's really insightful. I appreciate those comments and views. I think that is exactly the point that the next kind of point of discussion. We are drawing to the end of this workshop now. To finalize our points and to bring all of this together, we do see in general that there is a global shift, in the way China is working on the African continent to secure the green minerals and metals, especially looking at electric vehicles or e-mobility and the massive shift to e-mobility. We've done extensive research on that and the impact of for the mining sector on electric and the shift to electric vehicles. China is already controlling that. The mineral supply chain for lithium and various other important metals and minerals, and the contestation and the competition for Africa's minerals and metals for these green or low carbon minerals is definitely playing a support. You see America and all the other global powers are trying to get a stake and to lock in the secure of supply of these minerals for this. To Africa, and we need to ask serious questions in terms of what Africa's role will be into play in this new kind of relationship, the new role it will play for green minerals or low carbon minerals and metals. And then, firstly, that's my first question that I like to ask to whoever would like to respond, and then specifically more to, if I might ask Donna to a little bit elaborate then on this, to how can we institutionalize this kind of support to the AMDC, the Futures Literacy and Anticipatory Governance support? How can we institutionalize that to enhance the role of Futures Literacy and Anticipatory Governance with all the things that we've mentioned already in this work, the high impact key uncertainties, the context, the challenges, the changing conditions, and dealing with those uncertainties, and how can that then be playing an important role in how we view the mining sector and supporting the AMDC's role in the mining sector and the influence of that with the member states that are adopting the vision, the policies, and the implementation thereof. Thank you.
So thanks, Dion. So I can speak to the futures literacy piece. Happy to do that. So in terms of how to institutionalize support, there are a variety of different models out there that have been used. So there's not one way to do it, but I think what's really important is being able to have a structure that is inclusive of different stakeholders. So you've got different levels of governance, and it's inclusive. So you have the policymakers, right, and then you have the organizations, interorganizational business sector and mining that are expertise that are involved in a lot of the complexities of the day-to-day operations and some of the challenges. And then you have some sort of opportunity to integrate the citizen engagement side. And so that can look a variety of different ways. So there's an opportunity to kind of look at different frameworks to see what other jurisdictions have done or other models about trying to capture different levels of collective intelligence across the system, because that's what we're really doing, is we're capturing it from a forward-looking lens, from a bottom-up lens, from an innovation lens. Like there's many different lenses. So thinking through, how do you include people in that space, and how do you make sense of all of the intelligence in a way that you can use the information? So because you don't want to collect all this information and then it's not implementable. You need to be very, focused and strategic about, this is the vision, and these are some of maybe the top priorities that we're going to focus on, and this is how we're going to build, some governance to start with, right? And then you can always, evolve the structures over time. But I think that's one way to approach it. I do think that there's also an opportunity with participatory futures to think about experimentation and innovation and public sector, experimentation and driving that learning and doing it in small ways that, you can implement them, learn, and then evolve and adapt them. And that's a big important part of anticipatory governance. It's about being adaptive. It's about being agile. And sometimes the best way to do it is finding the opportunities to take those first steps and start to build a relation, start to, make a step forward, but learn and iterate, and then to expand as you go on. So those are just some of my initial thoughts. Yes, I'd love to hear what the other panelists, what their thoughts may be on some remarks.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Donna. Ross, and then learn more. I'd like to invite you to also have your final comments. We have about 3 minutes left of this workshop, so some last final comments to share on your views, how we can build this agenda to the implementation of the AMV through African mining futures and the role of futures literacy. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Dion. So just 3 quick comments in closing. First, I must pay tribute to Dr. Nicholas King, who participated earlier. I attended a talk that he gave many years ago where he said, look, guys, we're going to have to create safe fail infrastructure. Think wartime, think bridges that can be quickly unfolded and put away when the next flood comes, etc. So I think that level of anticipatory policy making is something we're really going to have to become attuned to. Second, we really have to attract responsible players, and we've got to build the collective action through collective intelligence to crowd out irresponsible players, because they're always going to be there looking for the next set of monopolistic rents. And then related to that, and thirdly, Recon Africa that Nick mentioned earlier is a key case in point of what we don't want. You don't want an oil drilling company risking your key carbon sequestration and biodiversity landscape. So we're going to have to get better at demonstrating the value that a place like the Okavango Delta holds, so that we can make very clear, coherent, swift arguments against fossil fuel exploration that may jeopardize that landscape. It's the integrity and the connectedness of that landscape that really matters for sequestrating carbon. So we've got to put some capital towards protecting that, and that means literally money in the hands of local communities who may otherwise choose to go with fossil fuel exploration at the prospect of jobs or whatever. We've got to literally put money in the hands of those local communities, depending on what they tell us they actually want, that incentivizes preservation rather than destruction. Because some of these trade-offs are real, and we really have to go with the set that we know is going to serve us well in the future. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Ross. Learn more, and then we will have Frank to close the discussion.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I would say for us to implement this new idea of future literacy, I think we just need to keep it simple. Like I said, we need to, to make it simple so that even a layman will have to understand. Otherwise, if we only have like specialists or technical people know it, in the end, we won't achieve much. And we also need to take advantage of the young generation that we have. Africa is for the young population. So when it comes to this issue of technology, we need to take advantage of the young generation that we have. Then also, we also have to do sort of a bottom-up approach. I would support what Donna have said, because in the end, most of these policies that it's just like a top-bottom approach. We are sort of like told what to do. Yet the local communities, the local-based organization, local people, they don't understand these things. So we have to take it down from bottom up. Then also have to take advantage of the SM sector. We cannot run away from the fact that in Africa, most of the minerals are being mined in the informal sector. So that consider the SM sector. If it doesn't consider that, then in the end, we don't benefit much. We also have to look at the issue of in terms of using the existing resources. That's why I'm to view that we don't need to form a new block or a new organization per se. Let's use the AMDC, the existing group, so that we use the existing resources rather than to form a new organization. Then I'm also of the view that we have to introduce, like in terms of education, why can't we change our curriculum and begin to focus towards the greener economy? We know that we are shifting from, minerals which are polluting the environment, of which affect many youth since they are the men. We need to begin to change our curriculum and begin to teach them according. Then also the existing mining organization, we must begin to train the existing workers so that when they shift to greener, to green economy or green minerals, they don't have to retrench them, but they simply have to, to take advantage of them. Then also, let's, as nations, they need to begin to change their national policies and begin to include elements of sustainable development goals and this issue of green economy. I have to accept that most of the African countries, some of them, they depend heavily on minerals. So it's not going to be that easy to move away from coal maybe to the 3TG, but they have to at least to begin to prepare now. I think that's all I can say for now. Thank you very much for offering me the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lenmore. I appreciate those comments. Frank, your last final comments, and then I'll just close off everything. Thanks.
Thank you. I want to thank Alex, even though he's not with us. We hope he recovers soon. and thanks for this opportunity. I'm quite happy for this discussion. It was very enriching, and I think we have a lot of pointers to take from here to go forward in terms of embarking on our road as AMDC and AU to look at invigorating, if I use the word, the domestication of the Africa mining vision. And these are key elements that we need to take on. First of all, in the review of the MV action plan was looking at what happened, what didn't happen. Now we have to look at what happens in the future, how we are going to take it forward 10 years down the road, because MV is more than 10 years now. But developing MV also took about 3 other years, because it came from a study that was done by the UNECA, which is also down there. So the work preparation for MV to come in place took a bit of time, with experts putting together and thinking we have arrived. 11 years down the road, we haven't yet arrived, and we have to start again and reinvent the wheel. But since we have all these contributions that look at how to make MV implementation be better, so that it can be effective the next 4 or 5 years to see the difference. That's very important. Conclude with what Lanmo has said in terms of reviewing policies at the national level, but also harmonize them at sub-regional and continental level is the work that we need to do, and bringing in these elements to ensure that the communities, the people on the ground, understand issues of environment from donors' perspective, understand all these issues that actually will impact the future mining, or even in future the mineral resource development for sustainable development, for achieving the goals of the UN, but also the goals of the African Union on social and structural transformation, inclusive growth, job creation, reducing poverty on the continent. All these are issues, including silencing the guns, an element that we didn't touch, on conflict minerals and so forth. There are so many things that we need to look at. And I think futures literacy helps us to put this into perspective and move forward with it. So I'm looking forward when we embark on the road to work with you in terms of supporting member states to arrive as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Frank. We appreciate your joining this meeting, and we look forward to building our relationship with the AMDC, and also building the networks to ensure that we address some of these key issues that we discussed in this meeting, and also the future issues. The futures of African mining is very important for the overall development of Africa, the SDGs, the AU 2063 agenda, and various other things, and mining will play a key role. And also the future of mining and the changing landscape of mining, whether it is to move beyond the current understandings of what we view as mining, is important. So futures means that we will have to also accommodate some alternative futures that of how we view our traditional understanding of the role of mining in shaping economies and society and communities, and we'd like to expand those possibilities that there and enhance the discussion on this. So we look forward to working with the AMDC. Frank, we appreciate your contribution. Learn more. Thank you for joining this discussion and your important insights. And we also have a special thank you to Donna Dupont joining us from let's call it Northern America, but she's somewhere on an island. I forgot the island name now, but thank you so much for joining us from the early hours in the morning from there, and we appreciate your insights, and we look forward to building our relationship with you as well. And for us, I appreciate the work that Good Governance Africa is doing and your contribution to the discussion. And let's maybe have a follow-up meeting to formulate some important points that we can share with the attendees, and to have a follow-up discussion on this. I now have to draw the meeting to a close, and we thank you for all the participants, your views, your contributions, and hanging in there until the end. Thank you so much, and we wish you a great day, and stay safe. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks very much. Thanks, Dion. Nice to see you again. Thanks, Donna.
Thanks, everyone.